but in my heart of hearts, it is a matter of life and death, not only for myself, for my children, my grandchildren, both of the flesh and spirit, but our entire community, not to allow anything that has been used to divide us to win.
Hi, everybody. So happy to have you with us here tonight. This is going to be a phenomenal broadcast. With us tonight, the Black Political Collective, is the Honorable Clerk Ellen Bragg. Clerk Bragg is a certified municipal clerk of Romulus, Michigan, and a Michigan professional municipal clerk. We also have with us tonight Nevada State Senator Pat Spearman of District 1. Pat Spearman was the first openly LGBTQ member of Nevada State Senate and is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and also an ordained minister. And I should also say that Clerk Bragg is an accomplished musician and vocalist. We are amazed at their gifts and so happy that they'll be with us here tonight. Hi, how's everybody doing?
Hello, great.
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Well, we got a lot to talk about tonight. We're close to the election. There's a lot of concern right now about voter suppression. Conversations going on about the United States Postal Service, conversations particularly in the Georgia area and Florida area about those who were formerly incarcerated, how they may be able to vote and voter suppression related to them. Conversations about the elderly and the homeless. How can we plan our voting? What's the best thing to do to have our voting plan together? And so I didn't watch TV at all this weekend with the exception of one thing. Over the weekend, I watched a documentary called All In, The Fight for Democracy. This is Stacey Abrams' particular initiative for accessible voting in the Georgia area. After I saw that video, it left me thinking about voter suppression. And Senator Spearman, we could kick it off with you tonight. Why is it important for us to have a strategy for voting? You have said that we often, and to use your words, feign intelligence while pursuing ignorance. So please talk to us about strategic voting and our responsibilities as voters.
So thank you, Dr. Lightsey. So I think what has happened to us, many times we get complacent, and I looked up some stats here. Since 1962, you have had Kennedy and Johnson to appoint judicial appointments to the Supreme Court, and at 1967, and then that was the last time that a Democrat appointed someone. And then Clinton in 1993, he had two, and Obama in 2009. The rest of them have been conservative Republicans. And it started to unravel with the Shelby case, when they gutted the 65 Voting Rights Act. Mm-hmm. And that should have been a clue to us right then that they were not playing about suppressing our votes. They do it a couple of ways. Number one, they put all of these ridiculous roadblocks in the way. You got to have an ID. Well, you got to be able to speak English. You got to do this, and I mean a lot of different things. And now with COVID, they're trying to cut down on the postal service, so people who want to vote by mail may not be sure that they're going to get their ballots in. So the thing that has happened is a perfect storm that has come in. Every time there is a presidential election, we as Democrats, what we do is we have this purity test. And if someone doesn't go along with everything that someone believes in, then they say, oh, well, I'm not going to vote for him. And in 2016, there were a number of people who drank the Kool-Aid about Hillary Clinton. And most of that was false. And they just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary Clinton. So they voted for a third party. And here we are today. Here we are today. And the Supreme Court justice that will be appointed by the current occupant of the White House, trust and believe they are not a friend of ours. And so when you talk about voter suppression, they have a lot of things in place, but we participate as long as we play checkers and they're playing chess with the voting system.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, you talk about roadblocks being in the way. So some of those roadblocks happen intentionally, and some things happen because we don't know what to do. We don't really understand the voting process. We don't understand how to prepare ourselves to vote. We don't understand how to fill out. Some of us don't understand how to, some of the points of filling out a ballot. So, you know, Clerk Bragg, I know you're here in a nonpartisan way, but will you help us to understand about this ballot? What are some of the major challenges, some of the major mistakes that you see people making when they fill out? And I'm thinking right now when I say ballot, and you can walk us through the different ways the ballots look, but when they fill out the mail-in ballots, what are some of the mistakes that people make?
Thank you, Dr. Lightsey, and I want to say hello to Senator Spearman as well and honor you. Some of the things that we observe, I think that it's the types of ballot being a type of election. For example, we just came out of here in Michigan, the primary election. So with the primary election, you have to vote straight party. And it's amazing how people, no matter how much you explain it and you break it down.
And that's in, and again, this is in Michigan.
And so we see that a lot with voters getting confused, which results in an abundance of spoiled ballots. We have a lot of spoiled ballots at the precincts, and even with the AV ballots. In November election, which you can vote cross parties. You don't have to vote straight party. If you would like to vote straight party, you can stay within your party, but you can cross parties in November. And I think just for what we've observed is just for voters kind of getting that, trying to understand that. November isn't as confusing. At one point, there was a case they had removed that option of voting straight party from the, for the general election. And what I mean by that is just selecting your party, just the oval. If you're a Democrat or Republican or Libertarian, if you selected that oval for that party, every Libertarian or every partisan candidate would receive a vote just by selecting one oval. And at one point it was removed. There was a court case, but a result from Proposal 18, which was a proposal that was on our last general election in 2018. So now voters have that option of selecting their parties, and they can just check that oval, and then it would allow them, for everyone in that party. So voter education seems to be a big one where we see the miseducation for a lot of our voters. They don't understand what's happening now. As Senator Spearman said, the roadblocks, what we're seeing now is an abundance of applications. They're sending out so many applications for registration as well as for absentee voting. So we hear the term mail-in voting, early voting, absentee voting. And there is a little difference. In Michigan, everyone who requests to vote an absentee ballot must request that ballot. It's an absentee voter ballot. They have to request it. In some states, that mail-in vote, they just mail everyone a mail-in ballot, or we call it absentee, but every voter without requesting it will receive that either the application or the ballot. So that's a difference. We keep hearing that term. So what we're finding out is that we receive a lot of calls because the voters are watching the news, the media, You hear the terms early voting, mail-in voting, and every state is different. They have their own election laws that apply to, to that state. So it can create confusion, and it creates panic. I think it's a tsunami of concern and panic. We see it with the elderly because a lot of times they don't understand the ballot. They don't understand the proposals on the ballot. These are things that we have found that we try to aid. As a clerk, we have to stay nonpartisan in every way, but we try to aid and assist our senior citizens by just explaining the ballot, explaining there's a proposal, explaining, how to vote, either straight party or, what a straight ticket, a cross party, voting is. These are just some of the things that we run across, actually every election, because every election is different and unique for the ballot.
Well, it seems to me, and I really appreciated what you said, Senator Spearman, when you were talking about the voter suppression. It seems to me that as I listen to you, Clerk Bragg, there is a lot of confusion that's out there. And it would seem to me that part of this confusion is intentional. That having voters be confused about what to do also makes them fearful about making a mistake. And when you got a fearful and a confused voting populace, there's bound to be some problems. So some of that kind of seems intentional to me, Senator Spearman. You think some of this confusion is intentional?
Whether by design or default, it's there. And even if it was just by default, at this point in time, there are a lot of people that understand that if you word things a certain way, there's going to be confusion. When you start talking about our seasoned citizens, many of them right now are homebound. They're not going out. So when you talk about mail-in voting, and then here in Nevada, the Republican Party sent out something that talked about, well, you don't mail in your ballots, drop it off here. And they made it look like it came from the elections office. It did not. So the intentionality, I think at this point, is irrelevant, because there are people that know the way it's voted, the way it's worded, that it is confusing to a lot of people.
Then what do we do? We know people are confused. So I guess I would say to the audience that's listening, some of the most important things that I think we can do is to help one another get the proper information. I've been talking to my barber here in Illinois. We were wondering when here they send us an application to get a mail-in ballot, and you have to apply and you get the mail-in ballot, but we haven't seen it yet. So it's in process. So I called and found out that it was in process. So part of the education is to say to people, call the election commission, find out what's going on. When you say that's one of the solutions here, Clerk Bragg, is that we make a direct call to the election commission?
Yes. Here in Michigan, the local clerks administer the elections. We are the elections administration for our jurisdiction. And I know some, every state is different. Some, the county or their state administers the election. I've been putting in my community, and a lot of other clerks, of sharing in the community at council meetings, on social media, just to inform our voters. If you're not certain, call. It's more work, but I'd rather the voters call us so that we can give the correct information, because there's so much misinformation. The ballots, we're waiting, everybody's waiting for their ballots, because that's a call. When are they going to be mailed? We're in the process of stuffing envelopes and preparing them. We have to begin having ballots available for voters on the 24th. And that's this Thursday. We will begin the mailing process of mailing out our ballots to our voters. The key thing is that, and that's the thing to share, call at, you said the elections commission, call your local clerk, call those, those that are administering, responsible for elections, to get the correct information. That's the only way, because everybody has their own spin on it. And they say, well, I heard this, I heard that. What you had mentioned, Senator Spearman, about whether, things are deliberate or if it's by default. What we're finding is that when people are, they'll say, well, we had a gentleman come in, he says, well, my son got his ballot, I want my ballot. I says, couldn't have gotten a ballot. There's no way he would have gotten a ballot because we haven't mailed them out yet. So, but we have to take the time and be patient with the voters to make sure they understand what's going on. When you take that time, then, and it's frustrating, but when you take the time, then they go away satisfied, they have correct information, and they can pass on that information. So it's just having accurate information to the voters, to the public, and to the community. I think one of the messages that I'm sharing is that don't panic. Don't panic.
Because a lot of people are panicking, right?
They're panicking. It's just, and it's a tsunami of misinformation. And we're seeing it on both sides of the aisle. Everyone is trying to help, where they are sending, for example, I've processed, one voter has received 4 applications. We have our applications from our clerk's office, which they're on our permanent absentee voter list, which we would automatically, prior to every election, send them an application. Well, we've had the state, our Secretary of State, they sent out applications to voters. And then you had special interest groups, and on both sides of the aisles, and candidates, they sent out applications. So then people are calling and saying, well, which one? Do I send in another one? How many? And so they're afraid that they're going to receive more than one ballot. So that's misinformation. It's one application, one ballot per voter. And then there are checks and balances in place to make sure that we are not issuing more than one, ballot to a voter.
That's the other thing, is this thing about voter fraud. Yes. So you do have checks and balances in the system. Senator Spearman, is your office getting a lot of phone calls also about people who are confused about the process?
So this is what we did, and we've been working on this, since probably since about March, maybe February. What we did here is we made sure to enlist various community groups, NAACP, the Chambers of Commerce, we've got the Divine Nine, a number of people, churches, etc. And there's been one thing that has been put out to all of them, so that when they explain what's going to happen, everybody's singing the same tune. And Dr. Lightsey, let me make this observation. Before 2008, did you ever hear of voter fraud? Did you ever hear of voter fraud? Did anybody talk about voter fraud in 2004?
No, you didn't. The most I've heard it has been under this administration.
And voter fraud, the idea of voter fraud took hold when a Black man was elected by a landslide. And they felt like, well, it had to be rigged. It couldn't be for real. So we turned up and turned out again in 2012 to let them know, that wasn't a fluke. This is exactly what we wanted, okay? And so I think getting all the community organizations together, get whatever the instructions are from the elections clerk. Some people call them elections clerk, some people call them the election administrator, but whatever they're called in your state, get them to do an explanation, and it can be just like Zoom, an explanation to the quote leaders, community leaders, so that they can answer questions when people ask them, and to make sure. And I'm telling everybody, when you get your ballot in, and we get a sample ballot here in Nevada too, and you can get a paper sample ballot, or you can get an electronic sample ballot. And so once you get the sample ballot, and it's written clearly on there, sample across, so you cannot mistake it, and you can fill out that sample ballot. What I'm saying to people is fill out your ballot early. Make sure that you get it in. If you don't trust the postal system, then take it over to the election clerk's office and drop it there. I know in the state of Washington, they have several, I'm sorry, in the state of Colorado, they have several different boxes at several different locations around Colorado. The citizens can put them in a locked box, and the only person that can open it is the elections clerk. So yeah, we're getting some, but not a lot. And we keep driving it home, keep driving it home. These are the things that you need to look for. These are the things that you need to look out for. And above and beyond all, we're saying to people, number one, check every day, right up to the last day to register. Check every day to make sure you're registered to vote. Now, why do I say that? Because I know that there are some people, you know, in other places that want to make sure that our votes don't count. And so then they purge the rolls, and then you don't know about it until you get up to vote. And they go, oops, we're sorry, we didn't mean, oh yeah, you did. You know exactly what you were doing. So check every day. And that usually happens. You can check that through the Secretary of State's office. There are two places you can check it in Nevada. You can check on the Secretary of State's office, and you can also check on the county clerk's office, because they have that information there too. And while I'm here, let me say this. Right now, since 2008, we've been playing defense. One of the things I hope we will do, I hope we will take serious the idea and the understanding that we need to make sure we have a Secretary of State in every state that understands the importance of the vote. And they cannot be co-opted by those who want to do voter suppression. The Secretary of State is the chief elections officer in every state. And unfortunately, many people have no idea what that office does. And so then you have people that get in, and some are trying to be true and trying to be honest, but then there are others that are cooperating, either by design or default, and they're cooperating with the voter suppression. So all the community leaders, please get together, find out what that says, and find out what the rules are. Read it verbatim. Read it verbatim. And if you have to do that, we've asked pastors to do it every Sunday. Do it at Bible study. Everybody, we've asked all, like I said before, the Divine Nine, we've asked the Chambers of Commerce, everybody who is, quote, in leadership, we've asked them, will you please read this information verbatim? If you can't answer the question, don't try to fake it, then give them this telephone number. That's very important. That's very important. And so the seniors who may be afraid because they're getting false information, I would say to them, go right back to the person who is in charge of elections. And Dr. Bragg, if you're in Michigan, call her office. Can I do that? Call her office. And if her office isn't the one that you talk to, she'll tell you who you need to call. But make sure that you are talking to people who know and understand and who value your right to vote.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Clerk Bragg, you're helping people understand how to vote. People are calling your office and you're walking them through the process all the time, every day.
Every day, yes. And it's important, making sure we have the information with newsletters, and again, utilizing social media, our cable channel. Personally, I go into like the high schools, into our senior citizen homes, our senior center. COVID has added another little layer to this, so we can't really go into the homes. We just put up today an extra drop box, a lock box, just for the seniors, located where we have our senior center. These are just different things to try to facilitate talking to them, working with our senior citizen director. There's another group that it was brought to my attention. We have homeless. And
how do the homeless vote when they don't have an address?
Well, it's where they sleep. So they can register and say, describe it where I'm on the corner of this street A and street B, and I sleep here. I'm staying at a mission here. So we just have to have a physical address where they sleep. So there are, we have procedures that we can reach out to the homeless. And we had a young lady come into the office. She's been homeless. She's staying in a hotel. And she said, you'd be surprised how many people are there in a hotel. And so they're displaced. So this is.
And they can vote.
They can
We
vote.
need to say that. They can vote. Homeless can vote.
They can vote. Also, ex-offenders can vote. This is really
In
important
Michigan.
in Michigan. So once they've served their time, then they can their voting rights are reinstated. Some may have to re-register because they've been gone a long time, or just wherever they're currently residing. If a person is waiting to be arraigned, hasn't been sentenced, and they're just waiting, they're eligible to vote an absentee ballot. That's not in every state. So we're very fortunate there that our election laws will reach out to those individuals. We've just had several ex-offenders and this is the first time we've had as many come, because it's putting that word out, making sure that they understand, as Senator Spearman has said, with our community leaders and these groups, making sure that information is available and that it's out there. I put it in all my newsletters and just just being available. And I think it's really something seeing different ones come in, especially the ex-offenders, and they find out they can register to vote. We have family members, that come in and says, oh, they can vote. Yes, this is what they need. And so it's,
so our task, and Senator Spearman is serious. She is hot on the case here. Our task is to make sure we get as many people as possible to the polls.
Yes.
We need to encourage people to vote. We don't need to be discouraging people to vote. We need to find every way possible to help people get to the
polls. Yeah, if I want to add,
exactly,
is that in 2018, November 2018, again, we had this proposal that really changed the dynamic for our election laws. And it really opened up the door to reach out to more people so that they can vote. For example, voter registration. So prior to November of 2018, to Proposal 18, there was a registration cutoff deadline. So you had to be registered 30 days prior to election date in order to be eligible to vote in that election.
Mm-hmm.
Now the registration, you can actually register the day of election. So the way that works is that there's a 15 days prior to the election, you can vote at any Secretary of State's office, county clerk, local clerk. After that 15th day, within that 14 days prior to the election, that individual would have to come to their local clerk's office to register. And they have to, show their proof of residency. The nice thing with that voter has the option of either going to the polls or voting an absentee ballot right on the spot. And this is all the way on election day. We had just a line of people that were registering. We had a lady that had just moved here with their daughter. She was in her 90s. And she came, we registered her, and she voted an absentee ballot. They can vote. They can't take it with them on election day. They actually have to vote it right here in the clerk's office. So those are some provisions, some things that are available, especially with our college students. And when people don't know, you go to the polls and they say, well, you're not showing up on your voter list. No problem. You send them to the clerk's office. And and if they have their, they can show their proof of residency, then we can register them that day, and then they can be issued a ballot.
Here's something that's, I think, really important. Two things. One, for those of you who are wondering if you are registered to vote, you can go to vote.org, and that will let you know if you're registered to vote in your state, in your area, because we're talking about two unique areas here, which I live in Chicago, in the Chicago area, but you can go to vote.org to find out if you are registered to vote. And some places, like Clerk Bragg has already said, will allow you to vote on the day of. There are other places we're beginning early voting already in some states. Here in the Chicago area, early voting starts October the 1st. When does early voting start in the Nevada area, Senator Spearman? You know?
October the 17th, and we're going to be doing a lot of things all around Clark County as well as Washoe County. Those are the two largest counties in Nevada. The Black elected officials are going to have a drive-through where people can come, and there will be a box out there with someone from the clerk's office that they can drop their ballot in, and we will give them food and some prizes and things of that nature. They will never get out of the car. And we also have available for them free flu shots. So, and that's on one side of town. And one of our county commissioners is doing something very similar to that in another location. And the radio stations have started really blasting it. And if you look at people's Facebook or Instagram or whatever, many of us are pushing that out on social media because it's important for people to make sure that they vote. And I want to say something else here that we haven't covered. You know, the vote by mail, and I had someone in our trans community to say to me that they're going to vote this time because they can vote by mail, because they identify differently than the gender assigned at birth. And they didn't want to be embarrassed going to the polling location, having a driver's license that said one gender and they appear as a different gender. And so the vote by mail is something that's really good for people who are in the trans community. It's also good for people who may not read as well as they want to, because you can get someone to help to read the information to you. You can get people, and they have to do it under penalty of perjury that they're doing the right thing. But you can get people to help read to you and read through that ballot. So listen, this is, we know, the most important election of our time. We know that. Okay, it's not hyperbolic at all. One of the things that we did in Nevada, and it made the current occupant of the White House extremely mad. We passed a law in August that said every registered voter will get a mail-in ballot. So you don't have to request it. It's going to every registered voter. And here's the thing: you can fill it out and mail it in, or you can go in person, early voting, and vote then, or you can vote on election day. And so we wanted to make sure that whole confusion about, do I need to request one, or, you know, what happens if I can't do it? And so we wanted to make sure that that would not be an impediment. The biggest thing that I want your listeners to know is this: whenever you get your ballot, and if you all aren't getting mail-in ballots, look and find out when early voting starts in your state, and go and early vote. That way, on election day, we can go and make sure that our friends, our frenemies, everybody, you know, that's registered gets over there and votes, because it is really critical. We're looking right now at a Supreme Court that's going to tilt the other way, and it will tilt in the direction of the but clause, B-U-T, the but clause of the 13th Amendment. And the but clause of the 13th Amendment is this: it abolishes slavery. There's no more servitude. But in the exception is if they are committed or are convicted of a crime. Well, why do we have a disproportionate amount of people of color who are encountering the criminal justice system and who are incarcerated? That's the one thing that, if they can keep doing that and there's no criminal justice reform, that's the but clause of the 13th Amendment. Am I making sense?
Yes, absolutely. Which makes it even more important for us to turn this thing around with our votes. We cannot afford another 4 years of this administration. Cannot afford.
And we won't have that. I want to say one other thing, and I'm sorry I interrupted you. The other thing that we did, we passed a law so that when people are released and they've done their time, their voting rights are automatically restored. They don't have to apply for them or anything. We want it, as I said before, you know, people should have the right to vote. And so every registered voter in Nevada will get a mail-in ballot.
This is in
And
Nevada, you all.
those who are in Nevada, if you have been formally incarcerated, you've done your time, and you are clear of everything, you can vote. You can register and you can vote. Don't let anybody intimidate you and try to make you think that if you register, that's a crime. No, it is not. What's a crime is them telling you that. That's the crime.
Well, look, I applied for a mail-in ballot. I'm gonna get it. Early voting here in Chicago begins October the 1st at the super. We have a super site downtown in South Loop area. The other early voting, where you can go to your local community polling sites, begins October 14th. So it's one big site where you can go, everybody can go and vote. And there's also this thing where you can take your vote, and I'm hearing you all talk about this, where you can take your ballot and you can put it in a secure box. Okay. I'm wondering, because I've had people who've asked me this, when I put my ballot in a secure box, do they empty these boxes every day? And do they process those votes on that day and begin to process the votes on that day, but only push the button so that it's tabulated with all the other votes on November the 3rd? How do these secure ballot boxes work? How does this thing work?
Well, I can tell you for Michigan, how it works in Michigan. Ballots are not counted until election day. They're tabulated through, we use the Dominion voting system. Ballots are tabulated at the close of polls. Then the ballots are placed in a ballot container. There are procedures and steps in how the ballot must be sealed, and that seal number has to be recorded in the poll book. And then those ballots are brought here at the end of the night, the close of the polls, and we're checking to make sure that everything is sealed properly and that the seal number is recorded correctly in the poll book. And then they are basically sequestered in a locked room until the election. Certified ballots are not opened or processed until election day. They go through a tabulator, a scanner, they're counted, and at the end of the night, that's when the results are tabulated or transmitted to our county clerk, and then they're advertised. So for Michigan, it's election day that the ballots are counted, and they are in an approved ballot container. So it can't just be any kind of container, Tupperware box, a lock box. There are certain ballot containers, you'd be surprised, but that must go through an approval process through the county clerk, the Wayne County clerk. And those are the only ballot containers that we can use. There's certain seals that we can use. So how that works, I'm curious when I'm listening to you saying that you have the center and then you put your ballot in a box. So my question is the ballot tabulated prior to election day in Illinois?
No, I doubt that. I'm not an election clerk, but
right. I'm just curious.
We put them in a secure box. I'm told that there are secure boxes which would be similar to other cities where people are putting their mail-in ballot. Mm-hmm. These little drop boxes that are located, I guess, near a polling place, so you don't have to actually go inside the polling site itself. Mm-hmm. But those are secure, just as I'm hearing you talk about you all's being secure also. I was just wondering if they empty these things out every night and begin to process them, because there's going to be a great number of people who are going to be back voting in the vote by mail process, or the absentee ballot. So how in the world will we even begin to know who won the election if we're going to have this large increase in vote by mail ballots? That's been the thing that's been on everybody's mind. But at the same time, people are more interested in putting their vote by mail ballot in a secure box rather than putting it rather than mailing it through USPS. USPS is a major concern for people. They rather take it to the election office or put it in a secure box. I'm wondering if you all are hearing the same thing also.
Right, we are, and people are
Yeah.
concerned, and that's one reason why we put up another drop box. I've had a drop box since I've been in office, you know, just to give that option for voters. We're working closely with our local post office. I think it's we've had some concerns with the post office prior to what's being advertised in this whole thing, what's going on with USPS. We've had some concerns. And so it's working with that and being diligent, working with the post office. I have their cell phone numbers and they have mine, so that when we have these ballots, and I know every day I should be having ballots come in the mail. And if I have a day that I didn't receive any ballots, that's concerning to me. And so that means I have to get on the phone, call the postmaster and say, hey, do we have any ballots? I haven't received them. And it might be the last election. I think we had 2 days. We had 2 ballots. That didn't make sense to me. So we called, and then finally the third day, then we had this big, huge, abundance of ballots, that came in. So I believe my message to the voters here, and those that are in Michigan, when you receive your ballot, we are required to start mailing our ballots out on the 24th, this Thursday, and voters in Michigan can start coming into their local clerk's office to request their absentee ballot. What my advice is, when you get your ballot, if you know who you're going to vote for, start educating yourself now. Again, we just received these ballots. The sample ballots are available on our websites, or you can go to the state website.
People need to hear that. Go to the state website and look for sample ballots.
michigangov.com /vote. You can go on that website and you can candidates, information about the candidates, the sample ballot, all of that information is there. Once you know who you're voting for, place it in the mail. One of the things that we do here as a convenience, and I know every jurisdiction's a little bit different because of budgetary issues, but to me it's worth it, is that we have prepaid postage on all of our mail, the envelopes that go out, and when they come in, we have, in fact, I'll just show you a sample. This is our envelope that the ballot will go inside. It's prepaid postage here, so that the voter doesn't have to worry about that. Drop it in the mail. The earlier, the better. I'm telling people, allow at least 7 days for that ballot to receive it and for it to come back to us. We're going to launch a campaign to mail it back Monday, 2 weeks prior to that election, reminding people, put your ballot in the mail. If you're uncomfortable, we have drop boxes. You don't have to get out of your car, drive through, put that ballot in the mail. Another thing I wanted to mention to you all is that on that Michigan Gov, and for those in Michigan that are listening, you can track your absentee ballot by going to that website. It'll tell you when we received the application, the application for an absentee ballot. It will tell you when we mailed that ballot out, and it will also tell the voter when, if we've received the ballot back with the date. So it's a tracking system that I think it's great, and I refer a lot of voters to use that website because at least they'll know, because people don't know. There's always this question, well, gee, did they get my ballot? Is my ballot being counted? So with this tracking system, and this is something that actually our former Secretary of State had put in place, and it's very resourceful. Another group that we haven't discussed are the military overseas
ballots, yeah.
And so there is a website that those members can, if you have family members that are in the military, even civilians that are living overseas, it's the F as in Frank, V as in vote, A as in Apple, P as in Paul, .gov.
FVAP.
Yes,
.gov.
Go on that.
Valentine Alpha Papa.gov.
Yes, ma'am. And that, when you go to that website, has all the information you need to apply. You can register. You can apply for an absentee ballot. And what happens with, and they're called move, we call them military overseas voter, it's called a move ballot. It just was right here in front of me and it just escaped me. But we're obligated to mail those ballots out 45 days prior to the election. So this weekend, every voter that completed that FVAP application received their ballot electronically. So they received an electronic ballot. They have to mail it back to us. But that, another thing, that application is good for a year. So if March they filed that application, they don't even have to worry. We keep them on file. And November they received electronic ballots. So that's really something important for those that have family members. And I understand we all have military backgrounds here, that we reach those, that the cohort of voters, that they know that they can still participate in elections.
So see,
I
it's done early. Yes, Senator Spearman.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that is universal, and that is every Secretary of State's website has the elections information on it. The candidates, and they have their website and everything. So if you can't remember any of the things that we've said, and you say, where can I go? Go to your Secretary of State's website. I was on a panel this past Sunday with Michigan has an AG, a woman, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And your Secretary of State is a woman too?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
so I was on a panel with them, and I will tell anyone who's listening, they are not to be played with.
No.
They are not to be played with. They're not playing when it comes to voter protection. And I know that our Attorney General here in Nevada, Aaron Ford, he's the first African American to be elected to a statewide office in Nevada. And he is nothing to be played with either. Trump put that lawsuit out on us back in August, and he immediately filed to get it dismissed. And guess who won? Guess who won?
He won.
Yeah, that's right. Wow. We did. So if you have any trepidation, any questions, you can't remember something, go to the Secretary of State's website, and you can find all the information there. And to those who are military members, I know when I was a commander, one of the things that I did was to make sure that everybody in my command was registered to vote. I don't care who you vote for, but you have to be registered to vote. And I always had the first sergeant checking to make sure that on election day, because at the time I was in command, we didn't have early voting. But on election day, I wanted to make sure that the troops got time off to go and vote.
Wonderful. Well, let me just take a pause for just a minute here and say to our audience, we're very happy that you're here with us today. We are asking that you fill out a survey. We want to know about the people who are going to vote. We want to know if you're going to vote. We want to encourage you to vote. And we have a contest for the persons who fill out this survey and who share this information the most. You'll win a T-shirt. And the T-shirt is a T-shirt of the Black Political Collective. All you have to do is go to the survey. There'll be a link posted up in Facebook in this particular broadcast. Follow that link, fill out the survey, and share that link with your friends. And take the opportunity to put yourself in the running to win a free T-shirt. This is a beautiful T-shirt by the Black Political Collective. Thank you all for that. Now back to our guest here. Let's talk about, since we've been talking about voting, let's talk about the day of voting, not mail-in voting. I've said to my friends, I will crawl across glass to vote. I have my mask, I have goggles, I have a little protective suit. I have everything just in case I need to vote. I have a backpack that carries water in it. I have a portable chair. I have everything in case I need to be in, and I'm not getting out the line. Understand, as long as you're in the line, you are eligible to vote as long as you're in the line. They can't close the doors. They have to allow the last person to vote.
Right.
That's saying a lot. That's saying we anticipate this voter turnout to be high. Even though we anticipate the voter turnout to be high, there are some people who are still not quite made up their minds about voting. Is there anything we can say to them? Anything you all want to share to people who've not yet made up their minds about voting?
You know, let me say this. If anyone thinks that there is not a dime's worth of difference between the current occupant and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, then you need to go back and look at what the occupant of the White House said about the 17-year-old that was carrying an automatic weapon, shot 3 people and killed 2 of them. He was not condemned, and instead he was praised and he was elevated. That ought to tell you everything you need to know in terms of who is going to be for criminal justice reform and who is going to be looking at what we need, especially in our community, so that we're not the hunted anymore. Black men, Black women, it doesn't matter. We've got to make sure we get people in there who are going to think about us. And the only people right now who have ever said anything about Black Lives Matter, about criminal justice reform, about making sure that we do the things that are necessary to fund mental health, and making sure that we get people who are homeless because of mental health. All of those things that are being said, they are being said by the Biden-Harris team. On the other side, you have someone who is praising white supremacists. So here's my plea to you. You know, Trump said, what do you have to lose 4 years ago? Guess what? 200,000 families found out just how much they have to lose.
Yeah, COVID.
How much they have to lose. And so, you know, there is no choice here. We've got to make sure we have someone in office who respects the Constitution that those of us who are in the military pledged allegiance to, and made sure that we would protect the country, would protect the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic, you know. And so those of us who have friends that are in cemeteries right now, we've got to make sure that we protect this democracy. So if you are still unclear, go back and find the clip about what the occupant of the White House said about the 17-year-old and all the people on his side. What they said about that. Go back and look at the clip of him in 2016 talking about, see my Black person over there, see my Negro over there. Go back and look at that. Go back and look at the fact that everybody who has been in his office have come out and said he doesn't care anything about the country. The only person that he is concerned about is himself. And so this election. If you don't know whether Biden and Harris are going to do the right thing, put them in office and then hold them accountable. That's what I say. Don't just say I'm not going to vote. Vote for them, put them in office, and then we hold them accountable. But we cannot. In 4 years, we won't have a country. That is plain as day. Putin wanted to make sure he had a puppet in the White House. Anytime you have bounties on military members,
that was it.
Zones, and you don't address it, and you don't even put something in place so there are some kind of a penalty. Anytime you do that, that tells you all you need to know about who is supporting the military. Anytime you talk about somebody who's saying, well, we're going to hold up on the payroll tax, and people say, oh, well, that's a good thing. No, it's not. Because if they do that, it will starve the Social Security network. And Social Security is not, quote, an entitlement that people just decided, oh, yeah, we're going to give. No. We worked for that. Look at fight. That's what you're working for. So anybody who has any idea to say, well, I don't know if I'm going to vote, go and look at that. And if he couldn't take Putin to task for the bounties that were on our service members' heads. And not only that, if you go back and you look at the conversation that Congresswoman Frederica Wilson had, remember when the young man was killed And he said, well, you know, he knew what he signed up for. Anytime you have someone who is that careless, anytime you have someone who will say something to Bob Woodward in April or in February, and then say something else to us in April, anytime you have someone, listen, you know, one of his people, and I'm trying to remember who it was, he ran for president, went to one of his rallies in Oklahoma and got COVID-19 and died 3 days before.
Herman Cain.
Okay, did you hear them mention his name? They didn't even have a moment of silence for him. That tells you all you need to know. These people do not care about us. And if we don't get out and go to the polls and vote, I'm telling you that but clause in the 13th Amendment will become law, because he's not playing when he stacks the court 7-2. 7-2. A lot of the freedoms that we have, and he said it again today. One of the first things that he wants to make sure that the Supreme Court does is to take away all of those, quote, LGBTQ stuff rights.
Wow.
Okay. So
wow.
Even if you're not a member of this community, if you know somebody is, if somebody in your family is, I tell them, vote for them. Okay. If you can't figure out a reason to vote, then vote for George Floyd. Okay. Vote for Tamir Rice. If you can't figure out who to vote for, or give you a reason to vote, then you just look at what's happening right now, because it's not just the 200,000 plus lives that have been lost. It's people in our communities whose lives have been decimated because the economy has gone south. And many people in our community will not make it through this. Some people are still waiting to get their unemployment checks. People in our communities are hurting. If you can't figure out who you want to vote for, please remember what I said. My name is Nevada State Senator PAT SPEARMAN, and you can look me up on the internet, and I ain't playing about none of this.
You're running for re-election this year, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
yes,
there you go. Senator Spearman, Pat Spearman, is running for re-election this year. You just heard her speak on it. Speak on it.
They can get more information on Spearman, the number 4, Spearman4Nevada.com. Spearman, the number 4Nevada.com. I'll put it here in the chat so you can find it, but they can get more information. Get out and vote.
They will have somebody putting it up on the chat. We see Monica Roberts has said that this is about democracy. A vote for Biden is a vote for democracy versus a vote for dictatorship. You know, how apt is that? We have got to be about the business of going out and voting. I know a lot of people are nervous now that Justice Ginsburg has died, but we knew this day was coming. Many of us knew that the possibility of this day was coming. And I you know, our responsibility is to carry on the work of agitating for justice, agitating for righteousness. And you do that with your vote this year. Now, of all years, people are saying we need to vote like our lives depend upon it. This is not hyperbole. Mm-hmm. This is your life. Your life depends, the lives of your children. We have climate warming. We've got to think about all of these things when we think about the election this year. And it may take some time if you're waiting until the last day. This is why we are encouraging you to develop your plan right now. How are you going to go about voting? Begin to do your research. Pull down a sample ballot. Know who you're going to vote for to make your time voting as short as possible. And vote, friends. Vote, vote, vote. I think we're down to the last minutes of our time today. Would either of you like to say anything else before we close up?
I'm going to be real quick so I don't take up a whole lot of time, but let me say this. Since 1962, we have only had an opportunity for Democrats to appoint someone to the bench. 1962, 1967, skip all of those other years, 1993, and then 2009. And so when you vote for a president, you must vote like your life depends upon it, because the Supreme Court hangs in the balance. This is important. A 7-2 court can erase Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. A 7-2 court can erase everything about Social Security. Vote, because our lives do depend on it.
And then, and Clerk Bragg, I'm going to get with you, but I just want to give you an opportunity too, Senator Spearman, because they're trying to muddy up the waters with a conversation, with a conversation about defunding the police. Do you have something to share with us about this conversation about defunding the police? Not that the intentionality is not good, but let's understand how those on the right are using this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the intentionality is good.
Yeah.
So will you want to say something about this?
And so let me say this. When we hear defund the police, those of us that are on this panel, we know exactly what they mean.
Yeah.
But those on the right have taken that and used that, and you've probably seen commercials. So to say to people that Democrats are going to defund the police, they're not going to have and we're not talking about defund the police. Words matter. Words matter. So I would appreciate it if people would talk about what we're really trying to do, and that is look at where our fiscal resources are going and make sure that we are allocating them in the places where they need to be. If 25% of the calls that come in to 911 on the police radio, if 25% of them have to do with mental health, then we need to make sure that whatever money's going into PD right now is going into mental health. If you got another 15 that are some type of physical impairment, then we need to do that. So we're not talking about defunding the police. What we're talking about is a reallocation of resources. And the right is using that against so many people. Some of the people who here in Nevada that are running for re-election that's being used against them. People are saying they don't want law enforcement. No, please don't say defund the police. Say we're doing a reallocation of resources, and that's what we want to do. And the reallocation of resources also comes with a caveat for accountability. That's what we have to
have accountability with the police force. We're waiting right now for a decision to be made about the murder of Breonna Taylor. So we are at a point where the police have to be held accountable and can no longer be allowed to hide behind police unions. And I stand on that. They have to be held accountable.
And that's not the worst of it. Even if they're convicted, in most places, they still get their pension.
And or go and join another police force.
Exactly.
Clerk Bragg, did you have a final word for us?
Just want to and thank you, Dr. Lightsey, just for this invitation. Senator Spearman, it's been a true honor, and I wish I lived in Nevada to vote for you. But just want to remind the Michigan voters that and all voters that are listening, don't panic. Don't panic. Visit as Senator Spearman said, visit your Secretary of State website, get the information, all of the information about voter registration, applying for your absentee ballot or early voting, depending on however that is in your state. Get the information. If you get your absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, mail it back early. When you go to the polls, be prepared. In Michigan, we have a photo ID requirement. And if you don't have the required photo ID, you can still vote. You just complete an affidavit of identity and just said, I'm not in possession of the required photo ID. And then you move on and you're issued a ballot. So don't let not having photo ID stop you from going to the polls.
Thank you.
And again, we want everybody, as Senator Spearman has said, we want everybody we have to vote like our lives depend on it. So
go to the polls.
Go to
Get there early. Get there early.
Get there early.
Exactly. I like what, can I just say 20 seconds? I like what President Obama said at the funeral of, just past Congressman Lewis. When he said, I bet when those highway patrol people, when they went home, and they started talking about how many heads they busted, and they talked about how many people they beat up. He said, I bet when they went home, they thought that was the end of it. They did not know how resilient we are. And so we about to show them. Okay? We about to show them.
Vote.
Watch the face. Yeah, vote.
Thank you, ladies. It's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I'm so glad you all could be here. It's not only about listening, it's about educating, and it's about doing. So you all have helped us do that.
Thank you, Dr. Lightsey. It's a pleasure meeting you, Clerk Bragg. Thank you so
Same
much.
here.
You're
Same here,
welcome.
Senator Spearman.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Dr. Lightsey.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
The majority of the people that I serve are the antithesis of what the current administration supports.
There's multiple people leading across the country, and there's multiple actions happening all the time, and these constant disruptions, and that's what we need.
And we can only prevail when we are persistent beyond the mechanism of the vote.